Even someone as accustomed to the worldwide rhythms of tennis as Rafael Nadal would have expected nothing but silence when the call came in the middle of the night, at 3 a.m. in Mallorca. Nevertheless, he picked up. He initially thought that was a common occurrence, a logistical problem that couldn't wait until morning, news from the Rafa Nadal Academy, or an update regarding one of the young players he coaches. However, the silence was immediately broken by what he heard instead. On the other end, the voice wasn't composed. It was tense, intense, and on the verge of panic. With more than 35 years of existence, the Upper Austria Ladies Linz Open was in grave danger. A crisis, not a small problem. Months in advance, organizers had confidently forecast ticket sales, but they had abruptly fallen. Whole parts didn't sell. Normally stable and dependable partners, sponsors were now agitated, doubting their pledges and even making suggestions that they would get out. And the explanation is quite straightforward. The main draw did not include Alex Eala. After her ranking dropped from number 29 to number 45 after losing to Karolina Muchova at the Miami Open, the 20-year-old Filipina, whose ascent had captivated tournaments across continents, was left out. It made sense on paper. This wasn't simply another player missing from the lineup, but in actuality, it impacted everything. The draw was this: the same player who had overwhelmed Melbourne fans with his presence. The same player whose performances in Dubai had caused enormous increases. The same player whose Miami jerseys sold out in a matter of hours. The energy disappeared without her. The sponsors took notice right away. These were the same companies that had seen her merchandise surpass expectations, witnessed her face take over social media, and possibly recognized her true worth better than the rankings ever could. They were now conveying a message: uncomfortable, direct, and clear. Prepare to lose millions if you don't give her a wild card. Nadal had stopped lying down by the time everything had been explained. He was awake and sitting up straight in bed, taking in the magnitude of what he was hearing. Because there was more than one tournament having difficulties. There was more to this. A clash between history and change, between a ranking-based system and a reality propelled by fan connections, worldwide attention, and cultural influence. Even Nadal, the king of clay, who has witnessed everything this sport has to offer, was astounded when he finally learned what the organizers and perhaps the Women's Tennis Federation were planning next. Linz, Austria, April 2026. It was intended to be a celebration for the Upper Austria Ladies Linz Open. A week of top-notch tennis, dazzling lights, and crowded stands were promised at its 35th edition, a milestone few competitions accomplish. Yelena Ostapenko and Katarina Alexandrova, two former and current champions, were scheduled to headline the tournament. The prize money had grown by more than $140,000 from the year before, indicating both expansion and aspiration. Everything appeared to be set up for success. The euphoria turned to panic when the statistics came in. The pre-sale reports were disastrous. Attendance forecasts that had been based on decades of consistent growth had fallen apart. Sales of tickets fell more than 40% from the prior year. Sessions that were consistently sold out. The final, semifinals, and quarters were now just half full. The tournament's very future was in jeopardy due to an impending financial deficit. The reason? Everybody in the room was aware. The force that brought down Miami's ticketing systems was the Ayala effect. Open, which caused a 48% increase in Dubai, was nowhere to be found. The main draw did not feature 20-year-old Filipina Alex Eala, who had emerged as the most captivating player in women's tennis. After losing to Karolina Muchova at Miami in the fourth round, her ranking fell from number 29 to number 45. The admirers who had come from continents away from Melbourne to Miami just didn't show up without her. The irony was acute for the organizers. They had cultivated contacts with local media and sponsors for 35 years. They had made significant investments in player development initiatives, marketing efforts, and facility improvements. They had created competitions that were reputable, professional, and trustworthy. But when Ayala was absent from the draw, it didn't matter. Because the allure of a phenomena in women's tennis currently outweighs the stats on a ranking board. She was more than a performer. She was a force for change. Additionally, Linz had recently experienced what it was like to conduct a tournament without one. Nothing else was important. The tournament was not attended by the spectators. When Alex Eala wasn't present, they stayed at home because they had come for her. The sponsor meeting was planned as part of the typical corporate routine of a WTA event, which included a check-in, a review of the tournament's finances, and a discussion of plans for next year. However, the mood of the room changed as soon as the ticket sales figures were disclosed. For months, the sponsors had been keeping tabs on the Ayala phenomena. They had witnessed the 48% increase in tickets in Dubai. They had witnessed the Miami Open ticket system collapse due to the overwhelming number of Filipino spectators. Ayala's jerseys outsold those of every other player on the field combined, according to merchandising reports they had poured over. It was also an easy computation. Revenue is comparable to Ayala. Due to low ticket sales and an aging fan base, the Linz event was not providing sponsors with the expected return. The voices became sharper. Answers to questions were required. The response was instantaneous when tournament administrators revealed that Ayala's ranking had declined and that she was thus barred from the main event. Bring her in. One sponsor lost it. How does it matter to us? Special exemption for wild cards. Whatever is necessary. We won't pay if she doesn't play. The tournament organization was rocked by the ultimatum. Linz was planned more than only tennis matches for the first time in its 35-year existence. It was struggling to deal with the crisis that it had caused. This wasn't about logistics, so no spreadsheet, marketing strategy, or years of expertise had prepared them for it. It had nothing to do with prize money. It was about one athlete who had grown to be more significant than the sport. The WTA regulations were clear. Traditionally, local aspirants or rising stars who hadn't qualified by ranking were the only candidates to get wild cards, which were awarded at the tournament organizer's discretion. Alex Eala, ranked number 45, would not have qualified under normal circumstances. However, these weren't typical situations. A financial catastrophe was imminent for the Linz Open. There were threats of withdrawal from sponsors. Sales of tickets had drastically decreased, and a ranking system that disregarded her actual worth was preventing the only player who could pack the stands and rekindle the tournament's vitality. Discussions within the WTA were allegedly hot and acrimonious. Some officials emphasized that there should be no exceptions to the regulations. Others contended that the restrictions were in place to support the sport and that it was time to reevaluate them if they were now impeding its growth. Rankings, after all, evaluated performance but not charm, impact, or the capacity to bring followers together. The sentiment was aptly expressed by one anonymous source. According to the official, Alex is more than just a tennis player. She is a phenomenon, and if the regulations are preventing the sport from flourishing, perhaps they should be updated. The argument highlighted a more significant conflict in contemporary tennis. The clash between regulation and cultural influence, between structure and spectacle. This was no longer merely a tournament choice for the WTA. In a world where one athlete might demand attention outside of rankings or conventional measurements, it was a test of significance. Alex Eala's name has the power to either save or completely transform the Linz Open in the midst of that tempest. An indisputable fact had already been established by Alex Eala. She could sell out goods, pack stadiums, and attract new tennis fans. The WTA needed to figure out how to identify that kind of influence, whether it was through wild cards, tactical seeding changes, or even a reevaluation of how the ranking system determines a player's actual significance. When the final decision was made, it was unheard of. Alex Eala's wild card for the Linz Open main draw was been announced by the WTA. The statement recognized the player's important contributions to the development of women's tennis while citing exceptional circumstances. The response was swift and divisive. In order to accommodate a player who hadn't earned her spot by ranking, the WTA was accused by critics of violating its own regulations. Others, however, saw it as an essential development and recognition that the sport and the way it interacts with fans were evolving. Although the Linz incident took the Ayala effect into uncharted territory, it had been discussed in tennis circles for months. Everyone was wondering why one player's presence was so important to a tournament's ability to make money. Connection was the solution. Alex Eala is much more than just a tennis player to the Filipino diaspora. She is a representation of potential. A young man from Manila who became prominent, celebrated, and unstoppable enough to stand on the largest platforms in the world. The OWF dream is personified by her. The notion that great things can be produced through sacrifice, unwavering work, and faith. Stadiums aren't only crowded when players from nations like the Philippines, where tennis opportunities are scarce, arrive. They are transformed. Pride amplifies every cheer. Each shirt and banner tells a tale. Every fan serves as a reminder of the importance of representation. Alex Eala is more than just a tennis player. She unites communities, cultures, and continents. The stadium was prepared to experience what millions had already experienced, and that bridge in Linz was set to reopen. There is more to her presence than just a game. A Davis Cup location is an example of inspiration in action. Earlier in the year, a seasoned referee made an observation. Not just for a single player, but for their nation. Economic activity is a result of the relationship. When I was in the draw, ticket sales in Dubai increased by 48%. Her jersey outsold more in Miami than all the other players combined. Without Linz, the event was in danger of becoming bankrupt. There was no denying the numbers. Ayala's attendance at a tournament brought in millions of dollars from ticket sales, merchandise sales, and publicity. Millions were lost in tournaments due to her absence. After years of striving to expand the game, the WTA had finally identified a player capable of doing so, but they didn't know how to deal with it. The Linz Open wild card represents more than just a tournament entrance for Alex. It's confirmation. It is evidence that her worth to the sport cannot be determined solely by ranking points. After losing to Karolina Makieva in the fourth round of the Miami Open, her ranking fell from number 29 to number 45. The 390 points she collected during her incredible run to the 2025 semifinals are no longer valid. She has the entire clay season ahead of her. Roland Garros, Madrid, Rome, Linz, Stuttgart. The difficulties are genuine. Longer rallies, slower conditions, higher bounces, and the need for tactical awareness and patience that hard courts do not require. However, there is something about her that no ranking can quantify. The love of a country that will accompany her wherever she goes. She will compete in Linz as the 7th seed, behind competitors such as Raducanu, Alexandrova, Tulsan, Samonova, Ostapenko, and Nevo. She will take on opponents who have won titles on the surface, have more clay court expertise, and have nothing to show. She will, however, have something that they do not. The encouragement of thousands of Filipino admirers who came to Austria to attend her performance. I may lose the first match or win the entire thing. You said in a podcast conversation with Andy Roddick, the former world #1. I'll win somewhere else if I don't get it here. These are the words of a future champion. And now that she has the wild card, she can prove it. The Linz Open was in danger of going bankrupt. Sales of tickets had plummeted. Sponsors were threatening to pull out. Officials from the competition claimed that the explanation was straightforward. Alex A. wasn't having fun. Following her devastating defeat to Karolina Mucha at the Miami Open, the 20-year-old Filipina fell from number 29 to number 45 in the world rankings. The supporters who had filled stadiums from Melbourne to Miami just didn't show up if she wasn't in the draw. A defeat could jeopardize the tournament's future. The sponsors then intervened. They asked that you be given a wild card into the main draw by the WTA in an unprecedented action. It was an obvious message. We're out if you don't get her in. With a crisis of its own making, the WTA gave in. Rafael Nadal, who has spent 7 years training at his academy, observed the drama from Morca. The financial sustainability of a tournament has never depended on a single player who isn't even in the draw, in my experience. This is unprecedented, he remarked. ISA now has something that no ranking can quantify as she gets ready for the clay season, Linz, Stuttgart, Madrid, Rome, Roland Garros. The understanding that statistics alone cannot adequately represent her contribution to the sport. The Czech curse is still in place. Despite her mediocre record on clay, she possesses a strength that surpasses any statistics. The unwavering affection of a country. Was it appropriate for the WTA to provide Eala a wild card?